Singh, the leader of the NDP, was just thrown out of the House of Commons for calling a Bloc MP a racist. Here he is now to defend what happened.
With people in the U.S. who are demanding action. But for a lot of racialized people, for a lot of Black and Indigenous and people of color, this has been a problem in Canada as well. Systemic racism exists in Canada. So we also have seen some horrible examples in the past couple of months. We've seen these images that are burned into our minds, images of Indigenous people being beaten up and brutalized. We saw images of an Inuit man getting doored, Chief Adam being beaten up over an expired license plate. And then we've seen the RCMP involved in the killing of Indigenous people. Chantal Moore killed in a wellness check, and Rodney Levi killed. And so in this moment where Indigenous people are being killed and being brutalized, Black people are being killed and brutalized in Canada, we've not seen any action. There's been no action. The Prime Minister took a knee, but didn't bring any policy changes. In the States, they moved quicker on some policy changes than even Canada. And we think Canada's a progressive country. But Canada did not bring forward any changes to the federal policing. So people are angry, people are frustrated. So today we brought forward a motion. And the motion was a pretty simple motion. Tackling systemic racism is going to take a lot of work and a lot of effort. But there's some clear steps we can take. One is to call out that, yes, indeed, everyone in this House, the House of Commons, in Parliament, acknowledges that there is systemic racism in the RCMP. Let's name that and make it clear. And then we went on in the motion to lay out some really clear steps. De-escalation should be a priority. I don't think anyone can disagree with that. We should be reviewing use of force because people should not be brutally beaten up over an expired license plate. And we put forward some changes around, shouldn't we respond to a health crisis with healthcare workers? Shouldn't they get funding instead of police? And in that moment, we put forward this motion that I thought, given where we are, given what's going on, given the lack of action, here's something we can do concretely to actually make a difference. And when the motion was presented, I heard a lot of people saying yes. And the speaker was about to move forward and accept that there was a lot of yeses. And then I heard one no. And the speaker didn't hear it. And then that MP repeated louder so he could be heard. And I looked back, and he saw me look back and kind of shocked that anyone would say no to this motion. Federal jurisdiction, clear path to do something about systemic racism in a moment where everyone's demanding action. And I looked back and I saw that MP not only say no, but make eye contact with me and just kind of brush his hand, dismiss it. And in that moment, I got angry. I'll be honest, I got angry. But I'm sad now. Because why can't we act? Why can't we do something to save people's lives? We can do something. And why would someone say no to that? Glad these waters are here. Give me a second. Donc, dans ce moment,
in that moment,
on va faire face à la racisme systémique.
We want to face systemic racism.
Plusieurs personnes étaient dans les
Many people were in the streets
ils ont demandé l'action concrète pour faire face à la racisme systémique.
To face systemic racism.
Ça a commencé aux États-Unis et à travers le monde.
And across the world, there are thousands of people who are protesting for something concrete.
Pour quelques personnes, je pense qu'ils ont pensé que c'était seulement un enjeu aux États-Unis.
An issue in the United States. It's not an issue in Canada. But for the Indigenous community, for the African origin community, and any racialized groups, you know it's an issue in Canada as well. So we saw the Prime Minister with his symbolic gesture, but after weeks with no action, no concrete action. And at the same time, in the same time, we saw horrible examples of violence against the Indigenous community. We saw violence against a chief. We saw Indigenous communities, people, Chantal Moore and Rayon Levi, who were killed by the RCMP, and yet still no action from the federal government. Prime Minister Trudeau And today, we brought forward a motion for something simple. First, to recognize that, yes, absolutely, systemic racism exists in the RCMP, for one. And then recommendations on how to face the systemic racism. Simple examples: how we can reevaluate recourse to force, how we can change the priority of action to reduce tensions in a conflict, so de-escalation. And then commit to saying that during someone's health crisis, we need health workers and not police. So investment in health instead of police. And also to have more data, evidence to establish the reality of systemic racism. And the president, after we made this motion, the speaker heard a lot of yes. I said yes, it's something that's easy to do, and I had complete confidence that we would pass this motion. So I heard a lot of yeses and one single no. And I looked back, and I saw one single MP who said nothing, but the speaker didn't hear this no. So he repeated it louder, no. And I looked at him at that moment, and he looked me in the eye, and he made this gesture. And that gesture did something to me, because it was a gesture to brush aside these concerns. It was a gesture of brushing aside the importance of people. So what he did with this gesture, he brushed aside the importance of the indigenous community, people who were killed, people of African origin. He had, in fact, things we've seen for decades, since the beginning, and he did that. He just brushed aside their concerns. These people want something done in a crisis, and it made me angry. And what I did was, because I was still there, and now I'm sad. I'm sad because why can't we act? Why can't, as a House of Commons, do something simple that will save lives? And that's what happened. And if you have questions, I'm ready.
I'll take questions, starting with question on the phone. Sorry, David. One question, one follow-up for reporters. Nous allons prendre des questions. On va commencer par des questions au téléphone. 3 questions. Une question de suivi. Opératrice, avons-nous une première question? Sorry. Opératrice, première question.
Operator, first question.
Notre première question, our first question is from Marika Walsh with the Globe and Mail. Please go ahead. À vous la parole. Hi, Mr. Singh. Can you walk us through, had you discussed this with the parties beforehand? And can you just sort of walk us through that part just so we know what led up to this?
Sure. We had given notice of the motion to all parties, as we usually do. And when the moment came to present the motion was I presented the motion, and nearly the entire Chamber of Commons was in support. It seemed like almost all parties were in support, with the exception of one party. Well, it was one person.
And are you calling this one Bloc MP racist, or the entire party racist?
Well, I'm going to say I don't back down from standing up to racism. And I'm going to answer your question, but I also want to qualify that I don't think it benefits for me to call people names. I was angry in the moment, and I stand by it. But let me just put it this way. We had a motion to call out the systemic racism in the RCMP and provide some really clear steps to stop it in the future. Anyone who wants to vote against that is a racist, yes.
Opératrice, prochaine question.
Next question.
Thank you. Merci. Our next question, notre prochaine question is from Émilie Bergeron avec Agence QMI. Please go ahead. À vous la parole.
Bonjour, Monsieur Singh.
Hello, Mr. Singh. You seem to have taken this refusal by Mr. Terrien, this Bloc MP, for having voted against this motion. You seem to have taken it very personally. You say he looked you in the eye at the moment of voting against, opposing your motion. And you, can you just say how you felt at that moment? Did you take this as a personal gesture? Did this bring up memories for you? Yes, thank you. It was about me, because I'm an MP. I'm the leader of a party. I'm in a position of power to push issues. And I found this gesture, and the way he did it, exactly, he just brushed aside concerns. Not just me, yes. I look after people who face systemic racism, but effectively what he did and what I felt when he just brushed aside the concerns of the entire Indigenous community, people who were killed in the recent past. He effectively said that there is no value to the lives of the people who were killed by this RCMP and the violence against the Indigenous community and all racialized communities and blacks. Effectively, what he said with this gesture, what I found, it was a gesture of saying that these people have no value. And that really affected me. I was angry. And after, like I said, now I'm sad. I'm sad that we can't act in the House of Commons, that the federal government cannot act to do something in this moment with all this support, all this goodwill to do something. It makes me sad.
Un suivi?
Follow up?
Oui,
Yes, the Bloc Québécois has responded in a written statement sent to the media afterward that they will vote in favor that in the motion for which the Public Safety Committee is studying the meaning of racism. Your motion had a very different language. What do you say to this explanation from the Bloc Québécois? I often find that when someone faces inequality and demands action, demands to settle this inequality, often those who oppress others say, oh, you didn't ask in the right way. Often that's what it is. When we face inequality, people say, oh, well, you didn't ask the right way. And that's why we're saying no. But it was a simple request and so different. A request to recognize systemic racism and to propose concrete solutions. Solutions that I think no one would disagree with the idea of reducing conflict and tension, de-escalation. Does someone disagree with the idea of reevaluating the use of force, recourse to force? Does someone disagree with the idea that there is systemic racism in the RCMP? I find it unbelievable that someone would vote against a motion that proposes concrete solutions in a moment like we're in, after what we've seen, several examples of Indigenous communities who faced violence and were killed.
Sure. The proposal that I put forward, that we put forward as a party, was very different from what is being suggested by the Bloc. And in fact, it's often been the case that anytime someone is from a marginalized community, someone who faces inequality, tries to demand something is done about it, they're often told they're not asking the right way. Oh, you know what, you're facing inequality and injustice, people are being killed, people are being the subject of violence, but you're not asking the right way for us to change it. And to me, that's an absurd argument to put forward, that not asking the right way to do something simple like acknowledge that there's systemic racism in the RCMP, to say we need to reevaluate the use of force, that we need to focus on de-escalation, that there should be a healthcare response and not a police response to people in a health crisis. These are really basic things that should have been implemented right away by the government. We have absolute jurisdiction over the RCMP. These are things that should have been done right away. And the fact that someone could vote against that, to me, is just unbelievable.
Opératrice, prochaine question.
Next question.
Thank you. Merci. Our next question, notre prochaine question is from Catherine Lévesque avec la presse canadienne. Please go ahead. À vous la parole.
Oui, bonjour, Monsieur Singh.
Mr. Singh, if I understand you're feeling being angry about these facts, but why is it the NDP suggested that the committee look at systemic racism? Part of this was inaudible. There's a big difference between studying a problem and presenting solutions. This is exactly the difference. We are proposing concrete actions, actions that we already knew. We already knew these solutions because this is exactly what the experts have asked for, the indigenous community already asked for, with many committees like the murdered and missing women and children, like the Conciliation Committee. These committees ask for action, and we're proposing clear actions instead of studying once again the problem. We have presented solutions, and the fact that someone could vote against solutions at this time, I find hateful.
OK, détestable. Mais quand même, est-ce que vous allez...
But will you were angry at the time, now you're sad. Do you intend to withdraw, or will you do you maintain your statement? Could you repeat? Yes, sorry, I said that you were angry at the time. Now you're sad. But do you still maintain that Mr. Terrien is racist, or do you intend to withdraw that statement? I say clearly, if someone votes against a motion that recognizes systemic racism in the RCMP and proposes concrete solutions to solve it, this would save lives and stop violence. Anybody who votes against that kind of motion is a racist.
From the room, nous allons maintenant prendre des questions dans la salle.
Hello, Mr. Singh. David Cochran with CBC. The Bloc has given an alternate explanation as to why they denied you unanimous consent, which I understand you don't accept. But why would you jump directly to the conclusion that one of your colleagues in Parliament was racist for denying unanimous consent?
In the moment, just to take you back to the moment, I expected everyone would support this motion. It was a very clear declaration of what years and years people have been asking for. And in this moment, we know is desperately needed some real concrete action. Acknowledging the systemic racism by the House, collectively saying that there is systemic racism in the RCMP, given all the things that we've seen recently, just in one short period of time, we've seen so much violence against Indigenous people and just the brutality and then the killing of Indigenous people. And then to suggest some really clear solutions. Let's just immediately look at the use of force, de-escalation, and healthcare people responding instead of police responding. Really simple things. And in the room, it was basically like 99% support. I was hearing yeses everywhere, to the point that the speaker was about to move forward because she didn't hear a no. And it was this brazen act of one MP to not just say no, but to say no loudly and to kind of gesture like this is almost like this is meaningless. And in that gesture, I saw exactly what has happened for so long. People see racism as not a big deal. See systemic racism and the killing of Indigenous people as not a big deal. See Black people being the subject of violence and being killed is not a big deal. And in that moment, I saw the face of racism. That's what it looks like when someone dismisses the reality that people are going through. And so I had a moment of anger in seeing that.
So you made this allegation of racism inside Parliament, where you do have privilege. We're talking about Bloc Québécois MP Alain Terrien, are we not? I mean, will you repeat your allegation outside that Mr. Terrien is, in your view, racist?
Yes, I've said it very clearly, and I'll repeat it really clearly. So let me put it out there directly. Anyone who votes against a motion that recognizes the systemic racism in the RCMP and that calls for basic fixes to the problem, reducing the use of force, calling for de-escalation, looks at ways of having healthcare response instead of a police response in the context of Indigenous people dying, in the context of violence against Indigenous people and Black people. In that context, someone who votes against that is a racist. Yes.
Hi, Mr. Sam. Mackenzie Gray with CTV News. Have you had any other previous runs-in with this MP or any other Bloc members on similar issues, whether it be in the halls, in the chamber? Has there been any kind of things like that you've had to deal with?
Well, previously, a motion put forward by one of our colleagues, Matthew Green, was about collecting race-based data during COVID-19. We've seen in the States and in other places that, primarily in the States and in Canada, we've seen clearly that there is a disproportionate impact on racialized people. And he put forward a motion saying, well, we need to keep track of that data to understand it. And that motion was also voted down. The entire House was in favor, and it was just the Bloc that voted against it. And this is another time when we're talking about systemic racism, calling out the RSMP systemic racism, and the Bloc votes against that. These are two times back to back in this moment where we're saying we need to do something about this horrible plague of systemic racism that the Bloc has voted against doing something about it. Really clear things that are fully within the federal jurisdiction. So I can't fathom why they would vote twice in a row against clear steps to do something about systemic racism.
They seem to be in the statement, and David brought it up in his question, and one of my colleagues did earlier, seem to have an issue about wanting to study it further in Parliament and it being a problem about some of the things that you put forward, letting Parliament do its process that way. Are you willing to put forward another motion that just simply says systemic racism is an issue in Canada, yay or nay, and have the House vote on it in that way?
Well, we were very specific that it's systemic racism in the RCMP. And that systemic racism in the RCMP is important to acknowledge given the inconsistency of the commissioner, given a lack of explanation on the part of the Prime Minister. When I asked the Prime Minister why he had confidence in the commissioner being able to implement any changes, when the commissioner just recently said that they didn't think there was systemic racism in the RCMP. Having the House collectively call that out is important. And then it's not enough to just make these gestures. That's why we were proposing some real solutions. And these aren't solutions that are unknown. It is very clear that there's a problem with use of force. Like, there is not a question. No one debates that. Why would someone vote against saying we need to change the use of force protocols? We need to reevaluate it. Why would someone vote against saying we need to focus on de-escalation? Police respond to situations with aggressive voice commands and aggressive gestures that increases the tension in a conflict. It doesn't de-escalate. That needs to change. And why would someone not agree with the idea that we need to have healthcare people responding to healthcare crises and not an armed police officer walking to someone's door who has a wellness concern or has a healthcare concern, who has a mental health concern, frankly? Like, that's the wrong approach. And we want to go beyond just the words, because people are saying words again and again. People are studying things again and again. There's been so many committees, so many reports. People are frustrated. They're saying, how many more committees and reports do you need? Just get some stuff done. And I want to get these things done. This is clear. These are not controversial ideas. The fact that we can't get the House of Commons to agree on these basic changes to policing is to me, highlighting the problem that we're up against.
Mr. Singh, you are the first racialized leader of a major federal political party in Canada. You've just been kicked out of the House of Commons for calling somebody racist. How do you square that circle, if you will?
Yeah, it's weird. If I can quote Charlie Angus, someone can act racist in the House of Commons and not get kicked out, and someone can call them out for doing something racist and get kicked out. I don't know. You figure that out.
What do you think that says about Parliament?
Definitely some problems. If we can't, in this moment, when Indigenous people have been killed, when Indigenous people have been brutalized, when Black people have been killed, we've got protests in the States, we've got this demand in the streets. Thousands and thousands of Canadians are saying, we want to change what's happening. We want change. We want something to happen. And the House of Commons can agree for basic, straightforward changes to the federally regulated policing service. We got some problems.
We have time for one more question on the phone. Opératrice, avons-nous une prochaine question?
Thank you. Merci. Our next question, notre prochaine question is from Philippe Vincent Foisy with Radio-Canada. Please go ahead. À vous la parole.
Oui,
Yes, hello, Mr. Singh. You talk about racism and people who vote against your motion are racist. I wonder, are there people who... do people who don't believe in systemic racism, are they racist too? I find completely incomprehensible that someone would believe that there's not racism, systemic racism in our society. I said that in this case, clearly, with the RCMP, there's no doubt. We've seen the examples, we have the evidence, we've seen the videos that show the treatment of the Indigenous community. So at this time, if somebody says no, there's no systemic racism in the RCMP. Oh, yes, I do believe that person would be racist. And if somebody does not believe in systemic racism in our society, same thing. How can you say that? In this time, when we have so many examples and reasons to show that there's systemic racism is a problem. For me, what's more important is how we can convince people to take concrete action, how we can change the mentality of the people. So, in my moment of anger, I used a way of speaking that is not something I do often. I want to use love and connection with people and sympathy and empathy with people to bring change, but I was angered by someone who would vote against concrete action to save lives in minority communities. Just before my follow-up, just to understand, for those, you're saying that those who do not understand systemic racism are racist. Is that what you're saying? I think I already said yes, but I think I can clarify this by saying, for me, the goal is not to call everybody racist. If someone's a racist, they're a racist. But my goal is to make real change. And for me, to make change, we have to present bills, change the policies, and this is my goal. My goal is not to name all the racists. Yes, we could do that, but for me, my goal is always to create change so that we can save lives, so we can stop the violence. And that's my goal. And that's where I want to put my effort. If you don't apologize, do you think you can go back to the House? For calling a gesture I found racist, I still think it's racist, and we'll see what happens in the future. Is there another question, operator, on the phone? Yes. From La Presse.
Bonjour, M. Singh.
Hi, Mr. Singh.
Est-ce que M. Terrien est le seul député du Bloc à avoir dit non?
Is M. Terrien the only MP in the Bloc to have refused your motion?
C'est difficile.
It's difficult.
C'est difficile de.
It's difficult to.
C'est difficile d'être sûr.
It's difficult to be sure. But he was one MP I saw, and he was the one MP I heard, and I can say the majority of the MPs agreed. The great majority agreed, and I heard almost unanimous yes and one single no. But to be accurate, I can't say for sure, but it was the only one I heard. Okay. Excuse me, Mr. Bellavance. I'm being asked to answer in English as well, so I'll repeat it in English, and then I'll take your follow-up. Perfect.
So, I heard a vast majority of people in the House saying yes. There's only one person that I can clearly identify that I saw and heard say no. And so I can't say with greater precision if there was anyone else. I can tell you that I only heard one person and saw one person say no.
En supplémentaire, M. Singh, vous avez dit,
you said
lorsque vous avez
when your eyes met with Mr. Terrien. You said, could you elaborate? You saw in the eyes of Terrien something that marked you? It was the gesture. It was more the gesture. You know, with his hands, he made a gesture like you brush something off, like it's unimportant. You reject it. You say no. You refuse. And that gesture was the gesture of racism. This idea of saying no. This is not important. The lives of indigenous communities, no, not important. Racialized communities, their lives, not important. The blacks or African origin faced with violence perpetrated by the police, oh no, that's not important. It was exactly that dismissal, this lack of compassion for human beings that I find is the very picture of racism. Operator, do you have another question? We have a final question.
Please go ahead.
Hi, Mr. Singh. Thank you for taking another question. Hi. Correct me if I'm wrong, but your reaction today is quite different from the one you had when it was revealed that Mr. Trudeau did the blackface on several occasions. You were more saddened by that, but now you seem truly angry. Can you explain the difference in your feelings? Today, we had a chance to do something concrete for people. We had an opportunity to truly change the direction of the RCMP. And at the same time, in the context of what we've seen, violence perpetrated by the RCMP against the indigenous communities, people have been killed by the RCMP, the indigenous have been killed. So today, the fact that an MP voted no, it was an act that stopped the ability to make change. And I was angered because people are demanding concrete action. People are saying that pretty words are not enough. And for a moment, I felt the anger of the people who are demanding more. And we had a chance to do something more. And this is why, in that moment, this gesture of rejecting an opportunity to make concrete action, take concrete action, it made me angry. With the Prime Minister, it was more the fact that I thought that of the people who love the Prime Minister, who think they are in a progressive country that welcomes new immigrants and welcomes people from all around the world, and the impact of seeing the PM mock their reality, that saddened me. That's the reaction of the new immigrants, the racialized communities the next day when the Prime Minister, that he was effectively mocking their reality. That saddened me. But today, again, after my anger, I'm saddened again that the House of Commons can't do something concrete to fix this problem and save lives.
Any more questions in the room? No? This concludes the press conference. Ceci met fin à la conférence de presse. Merci.
Thank you. Merci.